some people have genetic drivers of hearing loss. You go to a concert, like, there's no excuse to be going to a concert and not putting earplugs in. I have these cute little like jewelry earplugs that I wear anytime I go to a concert, or even if I'm going to be in a big public space that's loud, because it's really, really important to protect your hearing, protect it like it's your brain, because it is. Hearing loss has been strongly correlated with dementia. It's, because basically what happens is, as you stop hearing people, as you lose your hearing, you're now no longer getting these really powerful auditory cues that are driving these brain language activation areas. Like, language is
Mm.
such a complicated thing. It's such a, incredibly dynamic process, that you're really depriving your brain of that.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Find Your Fuel. I'm your host, Erin Martin, and today we're diving into what it means to overcome obstacles and push the boundaries of both health and high-stakes careers. I'm honored to introduce our guest, Dr. Rupa Juthani, who's a board-certified neurosurgeon who specializes in the complex world of brain tumors. She is one of only 220 female neurosurgeons in the entire U.S. So today we step behind the scrub suit to discuss her career, navigating life as a mom of two, and I also pick her brain on the non-negotiables that she keeps for herself and for her family's health. If you're looking for some inspiration on how to up-level your professional and personal game, then today's conversation is for you.
I was born and raised originally in Arizona, and then I moved to the DC area when I was about 10. And my dad was a doctor, he was a psychiatrist. My mom was a stay-at-home mom to three kids and was incredible. But really, from an early age, I always wanted to go into medicine, and I'm the only one of my siblings who did. But it was just something that always resonated with me. I used to go and round with my dad, and I sort of just loved the idea of taking care of patients and being part of that world. So when I went through school, I had like a very strong affinity for science, and I loved it. And I went to the science and tech high school that just really nurtured all of my interests. And then I majored in neuroscience in college, and I was totally sold on medicine and on the brain. And then getting to medical school, I think from maybe one of the first days I was there, I started shadowing a neurosurgeon. And the first brain surgery I saw, I was completely floored. The ability to enact instant change in someone's behavior, in their functioning, their ability to just, move through this world was just so phenomenal to me that I knew I wanted to do it. So everything I did throughout medical school was really to get me to that place, through this difficult residency. And then I went to residency. So I went to undergrad at Duke, and then medical school at the University of Virginia. And then I did my residency at the Cleveland Clinic, which was an incredible place to train. So I spent my residency there. And then I decided I wanted to do oncology. So I specialized at Memorial Sloan Kettering in neurosurgical oncology. And then I later joined as faculty at Weill Cornell, where I really began to develop more of that niche of oncology and what we call skull base, which we can talk about a little bit. But basically, most of what I do focuses on brain tumors and on conditions that affect the brain and the nerves. So then start early in your career, you sort of define who you are. And, that was like an amazing first job. And then I realized I wanted, a little bit of a different flavor and a little more independence. And I joined this practice, Neurosurgeons of New Jersey, and we're affiliated with NYU. And it's really just been an incredible experience these past almost 4 years now that I've been there. And that's really when I think you get to this point as a neurosurgeon where it's like a delayed adulthood. You're a resident until you're like 32 years old. And so here I am, and I'm 41 now. Embarrassingly enough, I'm 41. And now is when, you really start to realize who you are, and to sort of build the life for yourself that you always envisioned. So that's kind of where I'm at. Along the way, I was lucky enough to meet my husband when I was in medical school, and we were long distance my whole residency. And then we had my first child when I was a chief resident. And we had my second child about 5 years after that, because it took me about 5 years to recover from how difficult it was to be a resident and a junior attending with a baby. But, now I'm so blessed to have these two beautiful children and a husband and a career that I love. So that's sort
Yeah,
of
I
my journey.
can't even imagine. And I was wondering, is there, I think I read somewhere that you're one of 220 female neurosurgeons in the US. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So, board certification means that you have gone through residency, and then after you go through residency, you have to accumulate a certain number of cases and then present those cases and show that, you meet the rigors of what it takes to be board certified. And so that process can take 3 to 5 years. So there are, as of the last count, there are about 220 board certified female neurosurgeons in the country, which is
And
wild,
how many neurosurgeons total are there?
about 4,000.
Oh, 4,000. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
4,000 total. There's about there's, a rough closer to like 2,000, 2,500 or so board certified neurosurgeons. So that number equates to some fluctuation between 7 and 10% representation.
Yes. And so
Yeah,
I'm curious, throughout that career journey then, what was the biggest hurdles that you ran into? I mean, my brain goes crazy with the 80,000,000,
so
just
many.
anyone who's in the medical field. I thank you, and you guys are angels sent from heaven above, so appreciate everything you guys are doing, but throughout that, it seems like you were pretty determined and set on
Yeah.
everything, but what popped up as some of the biggest things that you had to overcome?
I mean, neurosurgery residency it's like I've never been to war, but it's an experience that in many ways shapes you and is similarly formative. You're going through it with a very small group of people that you have to depend on and trust implicitly, and you form very strong connections. But it's also incredibly demanding and relentless, and there's no break. You just don't get to recover during that period of time, and so that process really shapes who you are, and it defines your ability to get through the specialty and to practice in that way. And a lot of people will ask, does it have to be that way? Yes and no. To some extent, it's a really intense specialty, and it has to be sort of an intense training. But by the same token, could we make more accommodations to make it healthier for residents? Yes, absolutely. And so I trained at a time where it was not particularly healthy, but it trained me, incredibly well. But that, just the physical and emotional and mental toll of being a neurosurgery resident was a lot to overcome, but also I think I didn't understand the value of mentorship. I always had a lot of really great male mentors, but there just weren't really any women that I worked with. And so it never occurred to me that I needed to see that, to see what that might look like and how to navigate it. So, when I went through, like, no, there had been two women before me, but no one had gone through childbirth, as a
Yeah.
resident, which was it. Whereas like all of the male residents had kids and they never, they took like a couple weeks off. And so that had never happened. And, just getting the courage to talk to my program director about it and really to plan it down to the T, there's just a lot of pressure around that. But they were so supportive, and I took virtually no time off, but that was really that was on me because of my own pressure on myself. But I think what I loved about that was that after that, both the female residents the year below me had children during residency. So that sort of spoke to like the power of representation and the power of example, and something that I really hope to give to the next generation, which is kind of part of why I really delved into this space, is to just be, when there are so few of us, like, you have to amplify those voices, right? Because you may not find them, you may not find them in your community, you may not have them, you may not even know they exist. So it becomes particularly important to find those voices and to make them reach a much larger audience than otherwise they would.
Oh, I love it. And so I'm curious, what did your maternity leave look like then? What did you
Oh my
structure it
gosh.
like? And then how did you
Yeah.
even make that possible?
Well, so, in your residency, there are different models, but most residencies have 1 to 2 years built in of research. And some people, forego those years and do clinical work. I was at Sloan Kettering during that time doing like lab research. And so I was like, that this is the time. This is the time where I can be pregnant and this can make sense for me. So I fortunately was on my research. I still had some clinical responsibilities. So I was still operating and doing things like that, but I had a lot more flexibility in my schedule than I would have during residency, for example. Um, but then when I had my child, I took literally 4 weeks off after a C-section, and I was, back to working, and I became a chief resident when my son was 3 months old, so he's still nursing, and I was navigating that, and it was, a learning experience for all of us. But but it was, and then I was alone with him actually because my husband was in New York, I was in Cleveland, so I was
Mm.
like this single mom effectively during the week of this newborn and a chief resident working like 100 hours a week. So it was crazy.
Yes, and
It's
then
a
I'm
lot.
curious too on the you mentioned some other things in place that can make it a little bit mental and physical
Yeah.
better place, from that health perspective for residents and doctors, and I'm
Yeah.
also curious what ideas you have. Are there anything that has been implemented in terms of, like, cutting hours so you can actually get sleep, or what other
Yeah.
ideas do you have on that front?
Around the time I started residency is when we instituted this 80-hour work week,
Mm,
which that was like unheard of. So 80-hour work week came down and, the surgical residencies kind of struggled with it. Neurosurgery had an 88 exception because there was just too much to learn. And so we had this exception where you could do 88 hours, but, it's not so fixed because it has to average 88 per week. So that means like
mm,
you could go a week at 100 and then you could,
yep,
go the next week at 78 and you end up balancing it out. But that means that you have some really brutal weeks. And then there are other things in place, like you have to have this amount of time off, but that the interesting thing about it is we have that to some extent or residency, but when you're an attending like me, you don't there's no work hours. I could be on call for a week at a time and that could be really quiet and leisurely or that could be really intense and I could be operating every day and all night and you sort of have to learn how to train your body and you also have to learn how to know your limits. And part you really don't know that unless to some extent you experience the physical and mental stress of that in a safe setting. Residency is a very safe setting because you have so many people that you can depend on, right? If you've gone over your hours and you're too fatigued, you have a whole team working with you. When you're an attending, you do have support, but it's really on you. The onus is on you to know when to stop. It's not someone tapping you on the shoulder saying, "Hey, you're over your hours, you gotta go home." No one's
yeah,
telling you that. So it's I think it's that maturity is really, really important, and knowing your limits is critical. And people
yeah.
ask all the time, they're like, "Isn't it unsafe?" And, I assure you it's not unsafe because it is part of our training. And, we would never put a patient at risk due to fatigue. That's sort of why we train the way we do so that we know exactly how much is too much and what we can handle.
Yeah. What are those signs for you then too?
Yeah, like, I think for me, it's like irritability, like,
Mm,
when you're stressed, it's not like you can't think or can't function, but it's like, your fuse is a little shorter and maybe you're, a little bit shorter with the people that you're working with when you don't want to be or you don't mean to be, just because you have a little less patience. And so, whenever I feel myself getting a little snappy, I'm like, all right, maybe it's time I need
it's
to
time,
to take a little rest. Yeah.
which is such a good personal tip too.
Oh
Like
yeah,
if we
for
were
sure.
only just trained in our personal life of when we need to actually slow down,
100%.
we could
I
use
I
that
think about it
too.
with my kids all the time because, like, kids, they have, like, so little reserve. It's like my daughter's, like, the sweetest angel, and so I know when she's not being sweet, it's like she's either hungry or tired, and, I've failed a basic physical need of hers, and children are actually so good at recognizing that, and I think adults are not, and we tend not to be. We somehow lose the ability to recognize that we have human limits, so
Yes. And so I'm curious what your life looks like now as a mom of 2, working at the
yeah.
extreme level of working, I'm
Yeah.
also a working mom, but you're definitely a little next level compared to what schedule shifting I have to do. I'm sure you don't have an average week, but if you
Yeah.
had 1 week to share, what does it look like from your end? Because I've also seen you sneak,
Yeah.
workouts in,
Yeah.
you're spending time with kids, like, it seems like you're
Yeah.
doing it all.
Do it, but I think that, it kinda comes back to, like, similarly that work hour, right? Where it's like, it's on the balance, and there's some weeks that I don't get any of that, right? There's some weeks that are disproportionately imbalanced where all I'm doing is operating and working and meeting, and I may not see my kids very much that week, and I may not get to work out that week. But then, maybe the next week I have time to breathe and I'm going to the gym and I'm taking my kid, picking my kids up. And so I think having that mental flexibility to say, okay, I don't have time right now, but that doesn't mean you'll never have time. And it doesn't mean that it's not valuable when you do. It's that you build structures in your life to accommodate that kind of randomness in your schedule, right? And so, my life is very much, our family life is very much not built around me in many ways, right? In terms of dependability, nobody's depending on me to drop off. No one's depending on me to pick up or to make the meals or to do any of those things. But when I can, I do. And I love it. It's just that I have systems in place so that the world kind of functions without me.
Yes, so good. Yeah, and I think that that ebb and flow I also personally love in that
Yeah.
it pulls me out of the rigidity of I'm also a little type A. I wouldn't say I'm completely, but I love
I'm sure you are.
structure. I love process. And
Yeah.
so when something doesn't happen the day that I want it to happen, it's taken a lot of practice to say like, okay, it's fine to ebb and flow. This week
Right.
I'll do everything every day and nail it, and then other weeks
Right.
that's not gonna happen, and it's okay, and take that
It's
pressure
okay.
off of forcing yourself to always be doing something because it's just not possible to
It's not
always.
possible.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, and I think that, that's part of also just being kind to yourself, It's like you're not perfect and you don't have to be, just because I can't work out 7 days a week doesn't mean that the 2 days I get are not good enough, whatever. It's the best you can do. Like all you can do for any of this is to do your best and to try and to set your goals. But I try to really set myself up to succeed, not to fail. So like one of those things is like if I make it home for bedtime, that's a win. And maybe I don't, but if I said I need to make it home for dinner, I would fail a lot more times than I would succeed. And
Yes.
so that's sort of how I build things, And so then like if I'm doing a surgery and I'm getting an emergency, once I pass the point where I'm going to make it home for bedtime, I'm like it is what it is. Like I'm not stressed. There's no
Yes.
I'm not, that I put things in buckets of periods of time in my life. And so I that helps me a lot. And I also am so lucky to have, a husband that is so supportive and understands. Like he's a doctor too. He's a surgeon, he's an ophthalmologist, but his schedule's a lot more predictable than mine, even though his hours are pretty long.
Mm.
So, that he creates that routine for our kids that I can't always give them. So
Yeah, I
that's
love
really
that, and I love
helpful.
the freedom that comes with what you were saying about building a system,
Right.
because I think oftentimes we wanna spend as much time as we can with our kids. We, like,
Right.
love our kids, we wanna spend as much time with them, although
Of
I love
course.
going to work too. I'm
Right.
not gonna lie.
Right.
I was one
That's
of
part
those.
of what makes you a good mom, I'm
I was
sure.
ready to go back to work after maternity leave. I was not like,
Yeah.
"Keep me here." I wanted to go back. But
Yeah.
I think building in those systems, like you were saying, where you need support proactively
Right.
is awesome, whether it's a mother-in-law, an au pair if you have the resources. I mean, there's so
Right.
many other things where you could build in,
So many
a
things.
cheap date night if there's, something available at the community center, on Friday night. So you could build in these things proactively to be able to
Right.
have them as a tool and then not use them if you don't want to, but it
Right.
gives you that kind of freedom, which I love.
Exactly. Oh, that's really nice. No, it's nice to hear. And I think that it is probably resonates across specialties, right? Across what you do, different careers. No matter what career you have, you're going to have different things in place to be able to achieve your goals. And I think we can all that's kind of what I really want people to understand is, there's really no one right way to be a good mom or to be a good wife or to be a good career woman. There's so many ways to do that. It just is a matter of how much you want it, and how you define that for yourself. Like you get to define that for yourself. For you, that
Yes.
may mean something very different than it means for me. And that's fine. We can all succeed, in whatever way fits our goals.
Yeah, and not getting caught up comparing ourselves to friends or what they do and, "Oh, you don't do that," or whatever you're,
Right.
telling yourself, but define yourself by
Exactly.
your own standards.
Yes. Yes, 100%. And I think that's really tough in this like social media world where everybody's constantly comparing themselves to something that may not even be real. So I never want people to strive for my life. Like that's not the goal. The goal is to set your own goals and to just know that you can achieve them.
Yes. Oh, love that. And I do want to pick your brain on all things health in terms of just what the non-negotiables are for yourself and your family as well. There's a lot of probably brain health that you've learned. And so I'm
Yes.
curious on like what's your go-to non-negotiables for your family and yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think first starting with nutrition,
Mm,
where
yep.
I believe both from a brain health standpoint, but from a body standpoint, I'm a tumor doctor also. So I think a lot about carcinogens and, we are largely plant-based. We're largely vegetarian. We selectively have lean fish in our diet as well, and certainly incorporate dairy. But we largely have a plant-based diet, which has definitely been shown kind of across the board to be good for heart health, for brain health, um, and just for sort of memory and cognitive resilience. I eat a lot of fiber, like a lot of fruits and
Yeah.
vegetables, try to use natural sources whenever possible. My diet is certainly not perfect because I barely have time to eat during the day. So I may be using a protein bar, things that I don't love as replacements for, natural whole foods, but I don't have the same luxury that, I would have if I were making my food at home. But my children eat super healthy, it's all like whole grains and vegetables. And we really try to avoid processed foods as much as possible, but it's everywhere. And I'm a mom and, certainly there's there's no, we're not again setting yourself up to succeed, if it's a Saturday and I'm tired and they eat frozen pizza, that's great,
Yeah.
focus on the
What's their
positive. But
go-to then that they like that are whole grains and fruits and vegetables? What have you
you'll
got them
laugh. Well,
hooked
my
on?
son's like favorite food is like it's called a quinoa salad. So
Oh,
it's
yes.
it's like quinoa,
He's
it's
after
like,
my heart.
tricolor, I know, loves it. It's like quinoa and, some black beans and mozzarella and avocado and, just some, like, lemon juice and olive oil, and we put egg in it to sort of build it up and add a little protein. But, yeah, they, like, love that kind of food,
Oh,
which is,
I love
all they've
that.
ever known. They don't even we mostly have whole
That's
grain
probably why.
breads.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have whole grain bread, so they don't really even know what white rice is, except in sushi. So, and they like it. That's you can develop tastes in kids actually. You're not depriving
Mhm.
them as it turns out. They just truly prefer, whole grain things at this point because that's what they're used to. So I think nutrition is sort of a non-negotiable for me, but okay to deviate certainly. We're all human. Um and then for my kids' sleep, for me, I struggle the most with that, which we could talk about. But my sleep habits are not nearly as healthy as they should be. But more and more research is clearly showing that sleep is one of the most powerful things you can do for your longevity, for to protect against dementia. Incredibly powerful and important. Exercise, like these things sound so simple, but
Yeah, the
they're so
foundation.
powerful. You go through like all of these people talking about all these supplements, like it's like but they're supplements and they're helpful if you're doing all the other things, right? If you're
Yeah.
doing all the root things, the nutrition, the exercise, the sleep, like if you're not doing those things, the supplements aren't going to make the
Yeah,
difference.
creatine isn't
Yeah.
gonna get you where you wanna go if you're not doing
Right. If
all
you're
the
not
other
doing
stuff
every
right.
other things, right? Like again, like it's like, okay, a multivitamin's good, but if you're not actually eating any real food, then the multivitamin's not gonna compensate for that dietary restriction. So yeah, exercise, diet, sleep for sure. In terms of exercise, that's something that has evolved. I think certainly now there's, more and more showing the importance of strength training, and that's something I, as a woman, entering my perimenopause years, am trying to incorporate more and more. But I still strongly do believe that cardio still has significant value, for your heart health, for your endurance. So I try to, incorporate that. Steps are really important, and any way that works for you. I walk with weighted vest, so I always try to incorporate that. I think that's really critical. I think a lot of people, things go on fads, and it's like,
Yes.
gotta do tons of cardio. And then it's like, no, no cardio. Cardio is terrible. Now just do strength training. And I think, I'm really wary of anything that extreme. I think like use common sense. It feels good to move. So
Yeah.
move. It's good for your
Endorphins are
muscles and your
good.
bones to do weights. So do weights. But like any extreme, I think I kind of veer away from that to some
Yeah.
degree, with the exercise. But yeah, that. And then, when it comes to supplements, for I love creatine. I talk about it a lot. I mean, of course, you should talk to your doctor, and it's not safe for everybody, but the studies right now on creatine, particularly for women, particularly for people who are high risk for dementia, looking at it now for
Mm.
people with, advanced dementia states, it's pretty powerful. I think we're understanding more and more how it can be an adjunct to other, very good healthy lifestyle choices. So again, does not replace it, but it is a true supplement to that. So I think that that's very important. I use a multivitamin. There's cocoa, but there are other supplements like flavonoids that I look at that. I look at a lot of antioxidants and omega threes. Do all the things. Magnesium I use at night. It helps with sleep. Helps to regulate a lot of conditions involving pain and migraines and things like that. So I think that that has a role. But I think that, yeah, those are sort of like the core things that I do. It
Yeah,
seems
I
to be
love
like continuing
magnesium
to
at
add a
night
list
too.
of things. Yeah. Like, I don't know, but those are kind of the main things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
I think I
so
was reading lately that and I've seen this a few times that, a kiwi has like more magnesium than like a standard magnesium supplement, so I love the idea of getting things naturally. So, sometimes I'll give my kids, like, kiwi as dessert. It's sort of like just a natural regulator of sleep, so I kinda like that idea.
I ordered I can't remember if it was a dragon fruit or maybe it was a
Oh, yeah.
kiwi. I ordered one of those the other day, and one of my kids was like, "What is that?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have failed. Like,
Yeah,
you don't know what this is?" So now
that's
I've
so
been on
funny.
this triage of just trying to order every fun fruit or vegetable I can find.
So
I signed
fun.
up for Misfit Markets, and so now
Oh,
it's like a
cool.
fun thing to be able to try different fruits and
Is that where they
vegetables.
have, like, the fruit that is, like, irregularly shaped and rejected? Is that
Yes,
the
that's
one?
their
I love that.
advertising. So stuff is, yeah, basically on sale a little bit, but they have all these things that I have never heard of.
Mhm.
Mandarin quat, so it's a
Oh,
cross
yeah.
between a mandarin and a
A
kumquat.
kumquat?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so you
kumquats are
can
so
eat the
tasty, yeah.
rind. So my
Oh, I
kids
love
thought
that,
that
yeah.
was hilarious that you could just, like, take a bite into the rind
Oh,
and eat
yeah.
it.
Yeah, those kumquats are amazing. They're the opposite. They're sweet on the outside. They look like a little orange, but they're sweet on the outside and bitter on the inside.
Yeah.
My kids love that.
So, yeah, it is amazing how many great nutrients you can get if you just
Yes.
eat a little bit more variety.
Yes.
And some people
Variety.
think fruits are horrible, they're just sugar, and it's like, no, there's so much goodness in fruits.
100%. I completely agree with you. This is like goes back to like just common sense. It's like, no, fruits are actually an incredibly powerful source of nutrients, and the absorption from them is much better. And, you know, when people say like, oh, it's you might as well eat, like a Twizzler, it's like, no, that's just like an attention grabbing headline. Like they're
Yeah,
not the same thing.
yeah,
I don't know. Your body does not see it the same way. Fruits have fiber, they have incredible antioxidants, they have a range of nutrients. So we have like berries are like a staple in my house. So, I spend like an entire fortune on berries every week, unfortunately for me. But my kids love strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries. It's like in our house constantly year round. And then we do like mangoes and kiwis and apples and bananas and all the fruits.
Yeah, same on our end, and when, like, one strawberry comes back in the lunchbox, I'm like, "That's 50 cents. Eat it, like, you're still eating it.
Oh,
Don't
exactly
throw that
right.
away."
100%. In fact, like, I love berries, and I feel guilty eating them because 'cause I'm like, "We're not gonna have enough." They're gonna go one breakfast without
Yeah,
berries.
that little 4-ounce container ain't cutting it for us right now.
Exactly, yeah. So I love that. I mean, I think that and it's just raising kids with healthy habits, so I think that they develop a taste for all these things, and I stand by fruits are good for you.
Yes. Well, after the foundations, are you seeing any research in anything else that's kinda bubbled up or top of mind in terms of that next level then once you're doing everything right that
Yeah.
has cued you
I
in on
think
it?
I mean, as a woman, I think that what I'm thinking about now and what I'm researching a lot and learning about and talking to my doctors about is, the role for hormone balancing, and hormone replacement. I think it's so, so clear that in women's health, the decline in estrogen corresponds to so many changes in your body that lead to sort of like a rapid decline in your health, in your bone health, in your brain health, in your cardiovascular health. So I think that it's really an exciting time right now where we're learning more and learning to undo a lot of the harm that has been done with misinformation,
Yeah.
over the past couple decades, unfortunately. So, I was super excited to see the black box warning come off for hormone replacement therapy in the menopause and perimenopause space. And I think that that's what we need to be watching right now as far as women's health is what is the role for that? How can we best screen people? What do we need to be looking for? How can we be proactive instead of reactive? I'm really big right now on being proactive, in terms of my health and not waiting to develop osteoporosis. And then you're like chasing your tail. You're like treating the osteoporosis and then you're adding a medication for this and that. It's like, well, how do we prevent it? How do we how do we stay healthy as long as possible?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people still correlate women's hormones to our cycle, when
Mhm.
really it's every part of our body needs
Yes.
estrogen, needs testosterone, needs progesterone.
100%,
It's not just our cycle. So being able to
100%.
understand that correlation of like, oh yeah, when estrogen declines in your 40s, it can impact cognitive health, your physical
Yes,
health, like everything about your body needs these
yes,
hormones.
yes,
So I'm
and your
curious.
mood, your behavior, mental health, all of
Yes.
these things are so intertwined when we talk about all the we're understanding some of it through changes that happen in pregnancy, but, the reason that these changes are so profound is that there are such rapid fluctuations in your hormones during that period of time, so I think that that's for women going to be a key, and even for men, understanding the role of testosterone and the role of, androgen balance and all of these things. I think that there's so much that we're understanding about how like all these foods drive that, right? How do we have natural regulators? How does exercise interplay with your hormone levels? So I think it's really about just trying to again do everything we can to stay healthy, not just to reverse the damage that has been done over the years.
Yeah, and a lot of my listeners know I've done full blood labs to try to figure out a bunch
Yeah.
of stuff over the past year, and one of those is also checking in on female hormones. So I'm curious what you do
Mhm.
or how do you think about it from a preventative standpoint then? What are you
Yeah.
personally doing?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny because I one of my new doctors now is Dr. Alicia Robbins. I don't know if you know her, but she's great. She is a OBGYN, and she specializes sort of in women's health and in perimenopause. And so I was like, oh, great. I'll sort of have this be like my new primary care doctor because this is like the phase of life that I'm in where I need that kind of counseling. And so, we do a whole panel, of my labs and, we look at my hormone levels. Those are not, those are only like a piece of the puzzle. You have to talk to your doctor about what are your symptoms? What is your clinical state? What's your lifestyle? And you put all of these pieces of this puzzle together to figure out, what interventions are going to best optimize your health. And, fortunately right now I am, you know, I'm healthy, and so I'm really focusing on preventative care. And you know, I was like, I think right after the birth of my second child, I like actually became pre-diabetic, which was like a shock to me because I'm very small and it was not what I expected, but it's so strongly genetic. So I
Mm.
instituted changes in my lifestyle to deal with that. I started doing intermittent fasting, which really helped drive down my A1C actually, because I think that is absolutely critical. I think everyone knows that, I'd imagine, but certainly your glucose control is one of the most important things you can do for your health. And it has effects on almost every single system, every single organ system in your body. So that is really, really critical for
What
me
type
at
of
least.
intermittent fasting did you do?
Well, for me, it was honestly really easy because, the idea of intermittent fasting is just like periods of time where you're in a fasting state, right? So anything can trigger you getting out of that state. So any amount of sugar or, even low calorie things are going to get you out of that. So for me, I try to do like a 14 to 16-hour fast,
Mm.
which means that, after dinner, I basically don't eat anything until the next day, around until after my first surgery. For me, it kind of works out. It's pretty easy because I do surgery. And so, and I'm not really thinking about it. So I eat when I come out of surgery. What changed is that instead of having like a coffee and a bar in the morning, I have black coffee. And so I have black coffee every morning, but I don't have any kind of thing to get me out of my fasting state until I'm done. And there's actually been studies showing that, fasting enhances cognition and focus. And so I've also found that, and part of that might be age related. But for me, I do have enhanced focus during that period of time, which of course I love for my surgeries. And I'm not distracted by hunger. I'm never really hungry during that time because my body's not used to eating. So, for me, that works really well and has been like a very simple intervention that prevents me from really restricting myself in any other way. I naturally eat pretty healthy anyways. So that small intervention I think made a big difference.
Yeah, and that was the main thing you did, and were able to lower your A1C just because of that?
Yeah, and then like, I probably was it was just like, not having, like, a dessert, things like that, that were just, like,
Yeah.
small. I was never really a bad eater, but you have kids and there's, like, can't you've got things lying around all the time, and so I think just the process of not snacking much after dinner is really helpful because you can
Yes.
consume a tremendous amount of sugar in a very short period of time, and that's not the time where your body does a great job of using and harnessing that sugar. So, I think that helps a lot. I think it works better with your circadian rhythms, to just sort of be your metabolism slows down at night. And so that's really the time where your body needs to be resting. For me, I was doing the opposite because I didn't have time much to eat during the day. So I was doing like all my eating like late at night. It's not really a great way to function. It's hard on your body. You're not naturally built to do that. So, I had to sort of figure out what works for me and it's worked really well.
Yeah, I was listening to a gut specialist who was saying something similar in terms of working with your circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
And she was like, no one's going to like this, but you need to eat at 5 o'clock, like old
Yeah.
people,
Right,
which
right,
is what I
right.
do and I love it. But I am for
Like when
sure,
you're with
when I
your
eat at
kids.
5, I feel like an old person. But
Yeah.
then I don't have to eat, I eat at 6 the next day, but that gives me at least a
Yeah.
12-hour break on my gut,
Exactly.
and you
Yeah.
don't have to do any crazy fasting to just achieve a 12 or
Right.
potentially 14-hour fast to let your
Exactly.
gut rest. And yeah, you're not meant to be eating when it's dark out. So that was her whole thing, was when it's dark,
Yeah.
like, you're built to be sleeping and not eating. So, like, follow
Yeah.
what nature built you for.
100%. Yeah, and I struggle with it because my lifestyle is not built like that. I can't eat at 5. I'm usually still doing surgery or seeing patients. So I eat later than, I would like to, which means that my fast goes later. But for me, like this works and it can look different for everyone. I think it's like
Yeah.
daunting for people like, "Oh my god, it's a long time to not eat." It's like not really, if you're sleeping for 8 hours a night, it's not, fasting for a few hours before and after that is not actually much.
Yeah. Yep. And from a brain health perspective, is there anything that you see firsthand that you would want to tell other people about for brain health and, the future of just
Yeah.
brain health in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I focus a little bit on as we age because I think that, like, there's this critical period of time where the things that you're doing in, like, your 30s and 40s are what really is going to determine your dementia risk in your 60s and 70s.
Mm,
But I think at this point, we talked about the nutrition. There's really strong evidence about socialization, and that's like
mm,
socializing outside of your family. It can become easier and easier to get more insular as you age, but actually, socialization is like one of the most powerful things you can do to continue to keep your brain flexible. There's so much like language involved with socialization um and environmental triggers, and that socialization actually really increases these really positive neurotransmitters in your brain, and all of these things are really good for your health. So they, you know, do that girls' night because it's really good for your health, to have strong social ties.
yeah.
I think that people don't talk enough about hearing, and I have these AirPods in, and it turns out that AirPods are not causing cancer, but having really high volumes that are hurting your hearing, that's actually more dangerous. So, if you can actually
Mm,
reduce your volume with things that are noise canceling, and, as much as possible, not being in really loud environments, that is actually really, really critical. Some people have genetic drivers of hearing loss, but you go to a concert, like there's no excuse to be going to a concert and not putting earplugs in. I have these cute little like jewelry earplugs that I wear anytime I go to a concert, or even if I'm going to be in a big public space that's loud, because it's really, really important to protect your hearing, protect it like it's your brain, because it is. Hearing loss has been strongly correlated with dementia. So
mm,
it's, because basically what happens is as you stop hearing people, as you lose your hearing, you're now no longer getting these really powerful auditory cues that are driving these brain language activation areas. Like, language is such a
mm.
complicated thing. It's such a, incredibly dynamic process, that you're really depriving your brain of that. And then that actually leads to more social isolation. So, like, it kind of all goes hand
Yes.
in hand, right? So I do think hearing is actually really critical, and more people should be paying attention to it.
Yeah, that's such a
Yeah.
good learning for me because I always assumed the socialization piece was more for fulfilling in relationships as
Mhm.
opposed to connecting it to what's firing. Like that
Yeah, no,
when you're interacting with a friend, you are literally speaking, you are listening, you're learning,
yes,
you're triggering, you're
yes.
you're interacting in a very, quality way
Very
that's fulfilling.
dynamic way. Yeah. And we do so little of that now. We're like on our phones and like interacting with something that's not interacting back with us. So, I really think that now more than ever, forming and keeping strong social connections, human connections, is going to be critical for us. And then learning new skills, which we're also not doing a great job of anymore, because, like, what skills do you have to learn when, ChatGPT can do everything for you? You have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, learn something new, whether it's, learning how to ballroom dance, or, learning a new language. These kinds of things are fun, and they can be social, and they're, incredibly powerful to keep your brain flexible. And then if you really want to get deep into it, there's incredible things you can do to exercise your memory, building memory palaces and learning about how to harness the power of your memory. There's it is a complete untapped resource, and if you want to exercise your brain, it's literally as amenable to therapy and to building as any other part of your body.
It reminds me so much of just we have this push against our modern lifestyle. I mean,
Yes.
everything is needing to be proactive and push towards carving out time to learn new skills, like keep your brain active,
Hmm.
socializing more, and don't just strive for sitting on the couch at the end of the day we shouldn't be
Yeah,
striving for that
right.
at the end of the
Yeah,
day. We need to make space to try to be human, and we don't have
yeah,
a chance to be bored. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. We don't leave
yeah,
ourselves space to be bored and then therefore pick up a new skill. We're just filling
right.
the void with a feed, the television, all these other things that just leach our brains and don't get
100%.
us back to our original human self.
100%. And what's so interesting is, this culture of hyperstimulation has actually completely transformed our ability to focus and our attention and our memory. And we've moved to this world where people can't actually focus for more than seconds at a time. It's remarkable, seconds. And that I think is something we need to all actively fight. You like to build things in that have a different pace that slow you down. Like I'm in book clubs and I love that. And I still get that I have a Kindle, but I have the physical book too because I like the pace of it, and same thing for my kids. Like reading is really, really critical for us. We are a big reading family because the pace of that and the attention span that you need to build for that is really important. But I think you have to like go back to these things that we took for granted in our childhood. And now you have to actually do that intentionally, build that into your life. Otherwise, I truly think that all this culture is like melting our brains. I think it's severely inhibiting our ability to learn, and it's limiting our memory. Um, and for sure, it's changing sort of our reward mechanisms and what we find stimulating. Like it's this severely attention grabbing culture that I think is, super harmful, particularly for children, which is why I'm like so protective of screen time for my children, like incredibly, incredibly protective of it.
Yeah,
Because
what do you do then?
I mean, so we with my son, like there were like basically no screens at all until like age 4. And then one thing that I don't think people talk about a lot, but like they're not screen time is not all equal. I found like shows, especially modern shows are so at such a rapid pace and they're like
Mm,
so overstimulating
yes.
that I think that they're a very different flavor than like an old Disney movie, like but
Or
like if you
Mister
start.
Rogers' Neighborhood. Have you ever
Yeah,
watched that
right.
one
Oh,
recently? So
100%.
slow.
So like my if I my kids watch shows, they're like people are gonna probably hate me for this, but I'm like, they watch like Magic School Bus, like these old shows that are at a totally different pace that maybe have some educational content, but I actually am much stricter about shows than I am about like movies. So we let them have like a movie night, so they have one movie night a week. And I actually think that long form is better
Yeah,
for them. So I'm like, I'd rather you have like an hour and a half movie than like 2 half-an-hour mindless shows where like, what did you even get out of that? What was the
yes.
point? What was the plot? And to me, that I think is better for their attention and sort of for their world building. So, we do a lot of like read the book and then you get to watch the movie. So they're like really into the characters and the worlds. And they get excited about finishing like a book or a series. So we do that. And then, yeah, they don't have access to no screens during the week. They don't have iPhones, we signed like pledges, this wait until 8th, which I want to wait at least that long. They don't have smart devices. The, in the car, like we actually, this, our hack is like they listen to audiobooks in the car.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like if we have a long car ride or on the plane, they like love their audiobooks. And so they only have like a device so that they could have listen to an audiobook, and that's like completely controlled by us. But I think it's just a really wonderful way to make them feel like it's something fun and different, but and to keep yourself sane so, without giving them a screen. So
Yeah.
like it's just like, oh, you're in the car, you're long car ride, you get an audiobook, and it's like a treat. So
Especially when they're young, they don't know any better besides
no,
what you expose them to. They don't know that they're missing out on an iPad in the car. They're
no,
excited
because
that
it
they
doesn't
have an
exist.
audiobook in the car.
Exactly.
It does get hard.
Exactly.
My kids are a little bit older, so it does get hard when they realize friends
And
like,
all their
"Oh, my
friends,
friend
yeah.
has an iPhone." And we're
Oh
like,
my god, yeah.
"That's a hard no." Like, "You're
It's
10."
hard. I'll tell you, I struggle because my son just turned 10, and we just hate video games. I really do. I really detest them in this culture because I just think there's like it's like, yeah, I grew up with video games, but we had so many physical activities we were doing all the time that you didn't it wasn't the only thing in our life. Now it's like it's just so overstimulating that I find I don't love them. But we got my son a Nintendo Switch, and I'll tell you, like, even in the brief times now that he's been using it, I'm just like, oh my god, like, I wish we did not have this
Yeah.
thing, because you can see that these companies, they build these devices to be so addictive, and
Yes.
these children's brains are so, so malleable, and they're so responsive to that, and, like, we as adults get addicted to these types of things. Like, imagine a child who, has doesn't have the things in place to tell them why there should be limits, and so I I that type of thing, it's like not all screens are created equal, right? So, like, a video game screen time is like, you got 15 minutes of that,
Yeah. Fast
right?
and
So
furious,
it's
and then you're done.
yeah, it's like very and even with the video games, we're like, "Hey, you do the sports games," so we try to be protective of it, but, like, we all are figuring it out, I think. I think everyone knows their kid, like, each kid is different too.
Yes,
Some
yeah.
kids might be able to handle it a lot better than other kids, and you
Mhm.
just have to know your family, you have to know your kid, and I think that looks different for everyone. So, like, I'm very much like, you're the best parent for your kid,
Yes.
just because I make these choices doesn't mean those are the right choices to make. I think you just like have common sense and you're like, oh, I want my kids to be doing physical activities and to be playing sports and to be reading and to be learning. And sure, like you incorporate these things because, that's it's fun and it's okay to do that, but like everything in moderation.
Yeah, and I do like at least having a plan going into it, which again can ebb and
Yeah.
flow and the plan can get shot out of the window, but at least having some forethought about what you do want to have your kids' life look like around screens,
Right.
I think is important and to be
Yeah.
knowledgeable about what is happening.
Yes.
I mean, any big tech executive, I guarantee does not have technology that they're building around their kids when
Oh
it
my
comes
god.
to, Meta and all of those things, just because they
100%. They
know
know because they
what's going
know.
on with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, they
So,
know.
just
100%.
knowing how addictive it can be, and to your point of, like, crafting and thinking about what can you provide in the car? What are our
Yeah.
dinner times looking like? Being a little thoughtful about it to try to live
Yeah.
into it sets yourself up for success, and then again, can work some days and not the others, but at least you have a plan going into it as opposed
Exactly.
to a fight.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think, like, you sound like you're a lot better at that. My husband's a lot better at that too, is, like, he's just, like, super regimented about it. He's like, "We have a plan for everything." I feel like I get, like, this mom guilt, so, like, I compensate for, feeling guilty about not being around by saying yes more than he does. But, like, what kids need is routine and they need consistency, and so we try to do that as much as we can.
Yes. Before we close out too, on the dementia front, are there any other pieces that you're seeing as being super and helpful from either the research perspective or that you've heard to be able to help on that front? I know that's one of those things that as we become midlife in the sandwich generation, as we call it, where you're taking care of young kids and aging
Yeah.
parents, it almost
Yeah.
becomes more at the forefront, brain health,
Yeah.
because we're seeing our parents and our
For
in-laws
sure.
generation facing this, and we don't want it for ourselves. So,
For
is there
sure.
anything else?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think all those things that we talked about are being looked at. Creatine in particular, high dose creatine is being looked at to even start reversing or mitigating some of the dementia progression. They had done a study looking at high dose creatine for a 6-week period in patients with Alzheimer's. And,
Mm,
the results of all of that are still in the works, and so we don't really have answers for all of that. But I think it's not, there's no silver bullet, unfortunately. I truly think that think and hope we can do more from the metabolic front, understand more in the gene therapy front. I think a lot of interesting work is being done with GLP-1s and maybe their association with decreasing inflammatory states and ultimately decreasing dementia risk. And, the reason for that is so multifactorial. We know that, uncontrolled diabetes and, what we call metabolic syndrome is strongly correlated with, poorer brain health and dementia. And so certainly anything that's going to help you control for that is going to improve your brain health. So I think we're still trying to figure out like what the causation is there, like what exactly is leading to what. But I think it's going to be some combination of these things that we're using to both prevent and to treat dementia. Some combination of lifestyle, some combination of these metabolic interventions like GLP-1s, supplementation like maybe creatine, and then hopefully for the more sort of severe forms, I am hopeful that we can do something, in the way of changing the reversing some of the genetic damage that has been done that has led to that state. So I know I still remain very hopeful. There are a lot of studies that are still ongoing, and we're following all of them closely. But there's a lot of hope. I think that I feel extraordinarily hopeful about medicine and brain health and aging right now. I think we're entering this golden age of being able to comprehensively understand health and to be able to find things that are extremely targeted, extremely driven by precision medicine and this patient-centric approach that I think is going to be much more the answer than a lot of the way we've been treating medicine in the past, which has been like a one size fits all. And I think we're understanding now like that doesn't make any sense. Everybody is unique and each person deserves their own unique cocktail of things to help keep them healthy and um, to optimize their own potential.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really excited to hear what are those things gonna be when we look back and we're like, "Oh, well, we just didn't know that then," like our parents do,
Right.
like, "Oh, you were in the front seat at age 5 because it wasn't really a thing
Right.
back then," or,
Well,
all
I
these
think
funny stories we hear.
alcohol is that for our generation, right?
Yes, we went
Yeah, we
too
didn't have
hard.
yes, alcohol is the tobacco of our generation. I think like all of us are coming to terms with that, and like this is sort of where people like mistrust the in medicine and everything comes from, right? Where like it's like same thing with smoking. It's like doctors used to be like, "Yes, smoke to help your anxiety." And then they were like, "Oh, no, no, smoking actually kills you. You can't do that."
Yeah,
And so I think it's similar where the pendulum swings, and you go from one end saying something is healthy for you to the other end saying there's really no safe limit. Um, and I think that's something we're all grappling with. But I think the good news there is that changing your lifestyle, even now, at any point, really, I think implementing changes and cutting back on toxins at any point, even if you're not cutting it out entirely, there is benefit. And, so I think that sometimes what doctors don't do a great job of is understanding to meet people where they're at. And so,
mm,
there's this concept like, okay, well, if you can't exercise like 5 days a week, you might as well not. Well, that's not true.
yeah,
Any amount is helpful. Similarly, maybe you're not perfect in your diet and maybe you're not perfect in eliminating these toxins completely, but if you can cut down from where you were to 50% of that, that's going to help you. That's good. Like do what you can do. Do what you can maintain, and I think the most important thing is to be able to sustain it. So it's like it's not the strict diet that wins, like that never
yeah.
wins because like it's completely unsustainable. It's the moderation that you can sustain over decades. That's the one that's going to lead to your most healthy optimized state.
Yeah, and your body is so resilient. You can
So
change
resilient.
starting today. You can
It's
rebuild your
amazing.
gut. You can heal your gut. You can build
Yes.
muscle in your 40s. I mean, your body is so amazing. And yeah, you don't need a complete overhaul to get there. You can
Yes.
do small things with small steps that just snowball into something awesome.
I know I can talk about this forever, but I think I am huge on gut health and brain health. But all these things that we've talked about are part of that. All of these antioxidants, the fiber, the protein, these anti-inflammatory agents, all these things play into the same thing, and they're tapping into this incredibly powerful communication that happens between your gut and your brain, and that one drives the other. It's literally a continuum. So
Okay, I do have to ask you a little bit about that though, because I am so interested and confused. Because the
yeah.
extent of what I know after geeking out on it for so
Mhm.
long is that there is a
Yeah.
connection. So is
Yeah,
there
there
a little
absolutely
bit
is.
more science behind it that you can explain what is actually happening?
Yeah, I mean, so, the same actually the same there are you have neurotransmitters like in your receptors for neurotransmitters, which are like your chemical messengers in your brain. You actually have a lot of those in your gut. So
Ah.
a lot of the same chemical messages are actually happening to some extent in your gut. And so, when we're talking about gut health and brain health, it becomes much more complicated. Part of it are these chemical messengers, but part of it is also, your absorption and the pro-inflammatory state, what that inflammatory state does to your vasculature, the blood vessels in your brain. There's a lot about infections and sort of like the good bacteria versus the bad bacteria. We know for sure that, you know, infections are probably one of the main drivers of dementia, for example. And so like part of the reasons we
Mm.
know that the shingles vaccine was really strongly associated with a reduction in dementia risk was because of the reduction in that viral insult, and that we know that viruses drive dementia. Multiple viral insults can drive dementia. So,
Mm.
um, they're all sort of it's a complex interplay. I don't think that anybody knows for sure, but I do believe that like we can treat a lot of conditions in the gut, and it has a meaningful impact on your cognitive strength, on your mental health for sure. I think that a lot is being done, particularly um, with mental health, depression, and anxiety, and looking at how we can modify that through these changes in your lifestyle, changes in your diet. There's a lot being done there. Kind of at the cusp of it, but I think we're
Yeah.
learning a lot.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I think especially when, right now it feels like some of the answers are just anxiety pills, help with depression. We're
Yeah,
all trying to figure out what's the best way to tackle something that's really hard. And knowing that
yeah,
there's other things that we're going to explore and learn about more deeply than just throwing medication at it gets me really
for
excited
sure.
because it does feel like we're finally getting to more holistic medicine where
Yeah.
it's like, okay, if something's going on up here, like we're not treating up here. We're treating
Oh,
our
for
whole
sure.
selves.
For sure. My friend, if you're interested, Dr. Ellen Vora, she's amazing. And she's a kind of holistic psychiatrist in this space. And she
Mm.
focuses a lot on how we can harness our gut health in order to treat psychiatric conditions. And so, like, is that the answer for everything? No. There's obviously a range. And there's a certain population that are going to be receptive and responsive to those types of interventions, the same way, like, for your heart health, to a point, lifestyle is going to have a big impact, but then at some point you're going to need medication.
Mhm.
Similarly, I think we have these periods of time where we can maybe intervene and help prevent and protect. And then we've got periods of time where, we have to shift into some of the more conventional therapies.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, I know we could talk forever.
Yeah.
Dr. Juthani, thank you so much for joining us. Is there
Oh, my
anything that we
pleasure.
didn't touch on that you wish we would have?
No, this is so fun. We can talk lots more. Yeah, I'm, actively I think I'm a voracious consumer of information like you are, I think. So, I'm always learning more and always, excited to share that.
Awesome. Well, maybe we'll have to have you on later when a year from now when you've learned a lot more and we have more stories to
Yes,
share and I can prick your brain more.
always. Same, likewise. I need all the lifestyle hacks. You're welcome. So nice to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Find Your Fuel. If you enjoyed the show and want to support us, please leave a comment or review. And before we go, I have to give you the obligatory medical and legal disclaimer. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. The advice and recommendations we discuss are not intended as medical advice and do not replace the treatment or care of a physician or any other primary healthcare provider. Using the information shared today does not create a doctor-patient relationship, and it should not be used to diagnose or treat any health problem. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional before making changes to your diet, exercise routine, or medications. The use of any information provided is solely at your own risk. So in a nutshell, let's be smart and remember these stories and conversations are for educational purposes only, help other women find the fuel to live their best lives. We'll see you in the next episode.